Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Maisy Mok. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Police opened fire as they intercept a car with false license plates. There were no injuries. Hong Kong's heat proves unbearable for a rubber duck, leaving the city with just one. And Boris Johnson is called a coward as he quits Parliament. Two traffic officers have opened fire at a car with fake license plates as it tried to escape. No one was injured, but police arrested the driver and found cocaine in the car. A car with fake license plates was stuck in a traffic jam on Princess Margaret Road outside the Hong Kong police station at around 11 a.m. As two traffic officers approached the vehicle, the driver tried to escape by reversing into a car behind. The car then drove forward, hitting a police vehicle. Three officers, with two of them holding guns, surrounded the car when it stopped. The driver was arrested when he got out. Police said when the car tried to escape, two officers on either side opened fire. No one was injured.
Police officer is professionally trained on the use of firearm. There's very strict guidelines on this, and as I said, the only reason that the officers drew out their revolvers, their firearms, and use them is to protect themselves as well as other road users.
Inside the car, police found 80 bags of cocaine estimated to be worth $100,000. Superintendent Chung said the car was stolen and had been reported missing in Yuen Long in March. The 25-year-old driver reportedly has a criminal record. The sweltering heat has proved to be too much for one of the two rubber ducks, which glided into the harbor yesterday. One deflated, disappointing some admirers. Chloe Wong reports.
A shock awaited rubber duck fans in Admiralty this afternoon. One of the two giant rubber ducks they had come to admire shrank and shriveled into a mass of yellow. The duck deflated at around 1 p.m., leaving its companion alone in the harbor. The heat was blamed. Organizers of the two-week visit by the duck said the rubber had become too stretched because of the sizzling conditions. They had no choice but to deflate it for repairs. The setback didn't stop people from getting a close look at the remaining duck. Some held toy ducks and took photos. This woman was disappointed. Mrs. Moy said she had been eager to meet both ducks, which sailed into the harbor yesterday. But now she has to be content with just one. These two women said the ducks were supposed to bring double happiness. They hope the deflated duck will be able to return. Its remnants were towed away for repairs. The organizers said the remaining ducks is stable and will continue to go on display. It's not the first time that a rubber duck has collapsed in Hong Kong. A decade ago, the first duck deflated and shrank on the 12th day after its arrival. Chloe Wong, HKIBC.
The head of the hospital authority says the cross-border organ transplant scheme will not affect the city's waiting list for donated organs. Writing in his blog, Tony Koh said organs from Hong Kong will only be sent to the mainland when there are no suitable recipients in the city. He expects the chances of organs arriving from the mainland to be greater. Koh urged people to continue to support organ donations. Health and social welfare experts have urged the government to work more closely with the private sector to treat mental health patients. This follows a fatal stabbing attack that shocked the city. The Advisory Committee for Mental Health and the government have been commended for proposing several new measures to improve the city's psychiatric services. These include beefing up hospital manpower and prescribing new medication which has fewer side effects. Concerns rose after men who had mental problems fatally stabbed 2 women in a Diamond Hill shopping mall last week. Pediatrician Patrick Yip said the authorities have taken a positive step and called on the government to strengthen cooperation with the private and public sector.
Existing collaboration between the public and private interface actually has been there for quite a while, which is very effective. So in the coming months to years, one of the tasks is trying to enhance the involvement of the private psychiatric service in order to support more stable mental health illness patients in order to work together with the public service.
Yip's call was echoed by Sue Lai Shan, the Deputy Director of the Society for Community Organization, who was on the same radio show. She said mental health patients have to wait for months or even a year for treatment in public clinics. Sue urged the government to provide subsidies so that people can be treated earlier in private clinics. She also appealed to psychiatrists in the private sector to make their fees more affordable. Former Health Secretary Ko Wing-man, speaking on the Let's Talk program on iCable, suggested that mental health patients with milder conditions be treated by experienced nurses in specialized clinics. Ricky Zhu, who heads the Equal Opportunities Commission, called on the public not to discriminate against mental health patients, saying there's no direct correlation between violence and mental illness. Security Chief Chris Tang says more frontline officers will be deployed in the wake of a series of murders and wounding cases. Speaking on a radio show, Tang said police will adopt a higher profile in crowded areas. He dismissed concerns that Hong Kong is no longer safe, saying in some recent cases, violence erupted because of disputes among those involved. Tang said these could spur copycat cases by some people who are emotionally unstable and urged residents to care more about family members and friends. Overseas, Britain's former Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson has resigned as a member of Parliament with immediate effect. This came after he received a confidential letter from a parliamentary committee investigating whether he had misled MPs about parties at his official residence when Britain was in COVID lockdown. Johnson said in a statement that he was the victim of a witch hunt, but some lawmakers called him a coward for quitting before the committee's report is officially released. The findings could have led to his suspension from Parliament and a by-election. Johnson has hinted that he might return to politics, but his critics hope they have seen the last of him.
He thrives on the oxygen of publicity. So what on earth he'll do next, I do not know. So in some ways I don't care, but I do actually, because I care passionately about having people involved in politics that are decent and honest and honourable and don't tell lies. And that is not that man, Boris Johnson. So if he was to disappear from British politics, good, that would be good for British politics.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump has been accused of putting Washington's military secrets at risk after he left the White House 2 years ago. He faces dozens of charges in connection with concealing sensitive documents, which were later found in a ballroom and bathroom of his mansion in Florida.
Donald Trump turns 77 on Wednesday, but celebrations, if any, are likely to be subdued. That's because on the eve of his birthday, the former U.S. president will appear in a Miami court. He faces a raft of charges related to sensitive documents that he's alleged to have stored in his Mar-a-Lago mansion in Florida after leaving office. Investigators found boxes of confidential files in a bathroom, in a ballroom, and in a storeroom. The documents which investigators seized nearly a year ago included information on the U.S. nuclear program, potential military weak spots, and how Washington would respond if attacked.
Our laws that protect national defense information are critical to the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. Violations of those laws put our country at risk. We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone.
The 37-count indictment accuses Trump of concealing the documents, lying to investigators, and obstructing a probe into the handling of the files. A former aide, Walt Nauta, is accused of being a co-conspirator.
An indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with felony violations of our national security laws, as well as participating in a conspiracy to obstruct justice.
Trump maintains that he's innocent. He says the indictment is aimed at sabotaging his political comeback.
Former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, who served under Trump, led Republicans in denouncing the indictment.
This is a sad day for America, to see a former president of the United States indicted by the administration of a sitting president who's also a potential rival in the upcoming election. An indictment against a former president, I think, is going to be extraordinarily divisive at a very challenging time for American families. I also believe it sends a terrible message to the wider world.
Pence is among several Republicans who are seeking their party's nomination for next year's presidential election. He accused U.S. law enforcement agencies of bias. President Joe Biden refused to comment on the indictment of his predecessor, who is the leading Republican contender in the race to the White House. Biden added that he has not been in touch with Attorney General Merrick Garland, who launched a probe into the missing dossiers. There's been a miraculous rescue in Colombia, where 4 indigenous children have been found 40 days after surviving a plane crash deep in the Amazon jungle. The siblings were flown to the capital, Bogota, and taken to a military hospital. They will receive specialist care to help them recover from their ordeal before being reunited with their grandparents. Earlier, soldiers took the 3 girls and a boy from where they were found and airlifted them to safety. The children, aged between 1 and 13, survived in the jungle after their mother and 2 others died in the plane crash. Elite troops and indigenous scouts were deployed in a massive search and rescue operation. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to travel to China next Sunday in a bid to mend tattered relations. Blinken canceled a trip to Beijing in February after Washington shot down a Chinese balloon which drifted into U.S. airspace. Washington claimed it had been spying. Relations deteriorated further when Taiwanese leader Tsai Ing-wen met senior U.S. lawmakers in California in April. On to the weather now. It will be mainly cloudy with squally thunderstorms tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 27 and 32 degrees. The showers will continue into next week. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Saturday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Maisy Mok. Good night.